Well, hello everyone. Here is our first ed puzzle for semester number 1. And we ended last class with the idea that this statement about a ben sorer umoreh is really difficult to hold on to when we have all of the stuff we did last semester about machloket, and just explain to me once again why the two of those things don't really jive. I want to also bring in one other wrinkle that makes it really hard just to turn away from the ideas in Devarim, the idea about the Ben Sorer Moreh. And really, what we learn from this is A, that Ben Sorer Moreh exists in the world. It's a serious problem that has to be dealt with. And the way it is dealt with, the way the Ben Sorer Moreh is dealt with, is they are put to death publicly as a way of setting an example for those around, really squashing the anyone's kind of hopes or dreams to be a Ben Sorer or Moreh in the future. So not only does the act of killing kill that person who is stubborn and rebellious, but actually sets a precedent and sets an example for the rest of the community to learn by. So, one final wrinkle in this story are these two terms right here that are important to know. We know actually this first term is Aramaic, not even Hebrew, because it has an aleph at the end. That's normally a sign that this is Aramaic and not Hebrew. And this other word right here is also Aramaic, just because we know also the first word de on each of these means like she in in normal Hebrew, but de is interchangeable for so de oraita, de rabbanan. So de oraita means the de means of or shall, she, or from. De oraita means of or from the Torah. So one member of our class, Shana Birdie's brother, went to a yeshiva called Oraita, and that's in Israel. And there's a reason why it was called Oraita. Why was it called Oraita? Because it meant what? And then we have the other term, de rabbanan, of the rabbis. So when we see the word deoraita come up in the Talmud or in Jewish law, we always know it means that whatever was just said comes explicitly from the Torah. It's written in there. We see it in there, meaning it comes from God. When we see the words dirabanan, we know that actually, if I look in the Torah for that specific thing, it's actually not going to be found there. But the rabbis who are expert Torah interpreters kind of extracted from the Torah what it was saying. So when we say something is dirabanan, it means it is derived from the Torah, but the words themselves are actually not in the Torah. So, for instance, here we have a phrase that is in the Torah itself. V'achalta v'savata uve'rachta et Hashem Elokecha al ha'aretz haduva asher natan lach. When you've eaten your fill, give thanks to your God Hashem for the good land given to you. Of course, this Yud Hey Vav Hey, often we translate, if we're praying or in a holy act, we translate that as Adonai. But since I want to say I'm just, we're just learning, I say it's Hashem, but of course it's Yud Hey Vav Hey, so a name of God, a holy name of God. So when we read, this is from the Torah itself. So if you can answer these three true and false questions. Number one, true or false? Saying a blessing before you eat is deoraita. True or false? Now let's go back. Remember these terms for a second. Let's just go back for a second. So we've got deoraita and derabanan. So, saying a blessing before you eat is deoraita, meaning, do I see and hear anything that tells me that I should be making a blessing before I eat a piece of bread, before I eat anything? True or false? Saying a blessing after you eat is deoraita. True or false? Saying a blessing after you eat when you're not full is de deoraita. Saying a blessing after you eat when you are not full is deoraita. Okay, so let's go over that. So here we see actually this is a book of Jewish law called the Mishnah Torah, written by the Rambam and Moses Maimonides. And here's what he says: Mitzvah taseh min Torah. It is a positive mitzvah from the Torah, deoraita, right, to make a blessing after you eat. Why is that? Since it says in the Torah, you will eat and you will be full and you will bless God. So these words right here, and you will bless God, this is from the Torah, just like we saw here. When you have eaten your fill, give thanks to your God, because your God for the good land you have been given. Okay, so according to the Torah, you are obligated, by the way, that word chayav, we've had that word before, chayav, if you are full. However, derabanan, even if you ate an amount as big as an olive or a kazait, that's an important word to know, you need to make a blessing. So, according to the Torah or deoraita, you need to make a blessing after you eat. Now, according to the Torah, deoraita, do you need to make a blessing before you eat? No. Now, according to the Torah or according to deoraita, do you need to make a blessing after I eat if I eat a small little bit? What's the answer there? And why is the answer no? But the Rabbanan, the rabbi said, you know what? We're going to make a blessing even if you eat a small amount, a kazait, like an amount like an olive. And by the way, that's why actually in true life, if I eat a small little bit, I actually do not have to say a blessing, Birkat Hamazon, afterwards, the blessing after the meals afterwards. Now, just last question. We know we say blessings before we eat as well. According to the Torah, deoraita, do I need to make a blessing? No. So if that means, but we know that blessings are a part of our life. So what is it? It's not deoraita, rather it's exactly derabanan. So a few other, I'm just bringing this up because it's going to be important to us. And three important statements about the differences between deoraita from the Torah and derabanan commandments. Okay. When one has two competing commands and one is derabanan and one is deoraita, the deoraita command is always the one to do, takes precedent and is always the one to do, even if it means not doing the derabanan one at all. So if you have two conflicting mitzvahs to do, one is a commandment from the Torah, one is something that the rabbis said this is a good thing for us to do, we always go with the Torah idea before we do, or even in exclusion of doing the derabanan. And look at this, really interesting. A person's kavod pushes aside a negative derabanan commandment. How about that? So in a way, this is saying something really interesting, that actually the honor that a person is due, if the rabbis came up with a do not do X, and on the other side there's someone whose dignity is at stake, we can actually push aside that. Now what we can't do is we can't push aside a deoraita commandment because that's a commandment from God. But once we realize that the people have made it, rabbis have made it, well, then maybe rabbis can unmake it as well. We can't do that if it's deoraita. Last comment. Judaism shouts out the super extraordinary value of human life and requires that all deoraita and all derabanan commandments, except three, be waived in order to save a human life. This is an amazing idea that according to Judaism and Jewish living, if your life is at stake and you're told you have to violate a derabanan commandment, of course you do it. If you have to violate a deoraita commandment, you also have to do it, except for three things. By the way, what do you think those three things are? Right? Just to let you know, those three things are: one, if you're told, I am going to kill you if you don't kill that person X, that you have to say, no, sorry, I have to die. Second is, I am going to kill you unless you sexually molest someone else forcibly. Nope, you have to kill me. And the third is if you bow down to an idol in a public way, then you have to say no. Sorry, I'd rather die than publicly bow down to an idol. Um, all right. So why? And then here's my final question. Here is why should we be so concerned about the difference between deoraita and derabanan commands when we're looking at the idea of the ben sorer u more? Okay. So obviously the reason that we have to be so concerned is this is in the Torah. This is deoraita. So pushing it aside is not so easy, even though Keshet said we're going to try to figure out a reason for this not to stand. But figuring out a reason for it not to stand really might mean turning our back on what the Torah is saying. We're saying, oh, we heard what God says, but we're turning our back on it. So how do we do it? How do we support the ideas that we learned last semester about machloket when smack in the face comes this piece of Devarim that says, machloket makers, you guys are finished. All right. So, by the way, so before we move on, let's do a few terms that we should know at this point. So here we go. Ready? Machloket means, machloket means disagreement. What about machloket? Machaloket l'shem shemayim. What about machaloket she'eno l'shem shemayim? What about a koshi or a kushya? What about a teirutz? What about ben sorer umoreh? What about chayav? What about the word patur? And what about the words that we just learned today? Deoraita and derabanan. And I'll just add one word to the mix, kazait. All great, great words that we should know. All right, we were doing this in class on a class last week, looking at different scenarios and asking the question, is this person chayav or patur? And we said the only thing that you're allowed to use in order to determine if they're chayav or patur is the Torah text itself, is what comes from the Oraita, the Torah itself. So here you have it. Read it over one more time to yourself before you move on to the scenario. I think we have two more to do. Here we go. Hari Haman became a strict vegetarian 5 years ago. While Harry's parents thought that Harry's decision was a very responsible one and praised him often, they soon learned the error of their ways. Harry, you see, was a radical vegetarian. It was not enough that he was a vegetarian. Everyone around him had to be vegetarian as well, and if you weren't, Harry would make it impossible for you to eat. Harry would come home from school and check the fridge and freezer for anything with the slightest traces of meat. If he discovered a meat item, he threw it out immediately. After about a month, Mr. Haman accuses Harry of violating the laws of Bal Tashchit, unnecessary destruction of food. Harry replies by saying that I'd rather violate the laws of Bal Tashchit than violate the laws of murder. Harry's trial will take place on June 3rd. So, chayav or patur? Remember, chayav means guilty or obligated for being a ben sorer moreh. Patur means exempt or free from being a ben sorer u moreh. All right, next one. So, chayav or patur, and explain why, please. 3 sentences, no more than that. Okay, next one. Tamar Tachanun is known by everyone as Tamar the Terror. Tamar believes that anything she sees lying around the house or house of her friends is hers for the taking. Tamar steals everything in sight. Tamar has even begun stealing toilet paper from school bathrooms. It's softer than the stuff we use at home, she claims. The stealing reached a culmination when she stole the new puppy that her friend brought into school for show and tell on reading day. She is now in jail awaiting trial. So again, Tamar Tachnun, chayav for being a ben sorer moreh, or patur. Tell me what you think and tell me why. So the real next question we can ask is, can we go even further? What do I mean by that? The Torah says this explicitly, but we've already seen that you've engaged in a process of looking at an example of a person in real life and then looking at the text and saying, does it apply or doesn't it? And now I'm going to tell you the really cool thing about this piece of Torah, that the rabbi said, let's look deeper. Let's really figure out what is being said and what is not being said. Let's be the closest readers of a text possible. And through that close reading, let's try to find the exact definition of who is a Ben Sorer Umoreh and who is not a Ben Sorer Umoreh. And we're going to see the product through the Mishnayot, the Mishnahs that we study, of that that process or that task. So, but we're first going to try it ourselves. So here we go. Here's the activity. The rabbis who studied the Ben Sorer Umoreh psukim are sentences in Hebrew, taught these verses to their followers, looked deeply at the Torah text and tried to find loopholes or openings in the psukim, in the verses, in the sentences, which would limit the number of people that would fall under the definition of Ben Sorer Umoreh. So here's your task. Can you isolate the words that the rabbis might have used to limit the number of people that would fall under the definition of Ben Sorer Umoreh, of stubborn and rebellious? And here's my hint to you. In the Mishnahs that we're going to study, you're going to find 10 different loopholes. So the rabbis are going to find 10 different loopholes. So can you list all 10 of them from what is below? And let me just give you an example of one. Example of one is rebellious. Okay, so try to find your 10 before we move on. Okay, welcome back, everyone. So you've tried to find 10 different things in here which feel like they are open to interpretation. And we're going to see if you're correct. So here, I actually happen to have gone through the Mishnahs, and even before we study them, I'm giving you kind of a highlight of the loopholes that the rabbis found. And I'm going to ask you to kind of explain why you think this might be a limiting of a definition. So here we go. First one is rebellious, right? Why might this be a loophole? Number 2, son. Why might this be a loophole? Number 3, does not obey them. Why might this be a loophole? Number 4, father and mother shall take hold. Number 5, bring him out. Number 6, they shall say. Number 7, this son of ours. Number 8, defiant. Number 9, he does not listen to us. Number 10, glutton. Number 11, drunkard. Number 11. Oh, there are 11. Okay. So these are all, I've highlighted all the ones that the Mishnahs that we're going to study, the 5 Mishnahs we're going to study, are going to come up with. Do you have any other one that you want to fiercely advocate for? If so, do that in the Edpuzzle space provided right now. All right. So here we go. So is it a surprise then, after all that work you just did of finding loopholes, that this statement right here was actually written? There never has been and there never will be a Ben Sorer Umoreh. And my question to you is, first of all, is that a surprise? And the second question is, and the real question is there any way that I can show that the Torah is true and that the other statement is also true? How can this be true and this be true? It seems like for this statement to be true, there never has been and never will be a Ben Sorer Umoreh. This statement has to be from the Torah false, because it seems to claim that there is a Ben Sorer Umoreh. When you find him, kill him. So how do we find a way to make both of these ideas true? How do we make this idea that there never was and never will be a Ben Sorer Umoreh true without pretending like this text, what the Torah says, the Oraita doesn't, without pretending like it doesn't exist, because it does exist. Okay. Next, now we're ready to start looking at our Mishnahs. And so, first of all, what is the Mishnah? Okay, and here is the very traditional definition of what the Mishnah is. I'll also give a less traditional explanation of what the Mishnah is. So, the most traditional explanation of what the Mishnah is that when the Israelite people came to Mount Sinai, they got the Torah. They were handed this thing called the Torah, probably handed to Moses, and Moses brought it down to the people. But at that same moment that God is handing to Moses the written Torah, God is also whispering into the ear of Moses another kind of Torah, stuff that's not exactly in the Torah itself, stuff that's important to know about living, but isn't in the Torah. Now, did it not make it because it's not as important? I don't think so. Does it not? But there's a reason why some of the laws that are said into Moses' ear are in some way said and not written down, and we can discuss why that is a little bit later. Now, at some point, however, there's like the Moses then took those laws and didn't write them down as well. So basically, Moses had a written law called the Torah and an oral law called the Mishnah, and Moses carried those two to to Israel. And even though the Torah, the written Torah, kept on being written, the oral law was passed orally down from generation to generation and generation and generation. And so what I've heard is there are people called there were people who are amazing memorizers, and they were called Tanas. And a Tana would be able to, if you just said go, they would be like a tape recorder and repeat a Mishnah. They would be able to kind of tell you all the Mishnahs. You could listen, and stop, and so you'd know what the oral law is. Now, at one point in history, however, that oral law is written down, and written down probably when the Romans destroyed the Second Temple, so much later than the experience of Sinai. And there was a fear that, well, we better write this down because it might be lost forever. So all of a sudden, the oral law that was transmitted from person to person orally becomes written down, right? There's some danger in that, right? What's the danger in writing down something that's oral? That's a great question. And at some point it's written down, and so that oral law becomes Mishnah. So even though we have two written laws, the Torah and the Mishnah was oral, the Torah was written down. So here we go. We're going to, in the Mishnah itself, there are 6 books of the Mishnah, 6 orders of the Mishnah: seeds, holidays, women, damages, holy stuff, and purity. And in those books of the Torah, or orders of the Torah, there are other smaller books as well. So like in holidays, there's Shabbat, there's Passover, there's Yom Kippur, there's Sukkah, there's Megillah, there's Rosh Hashanah. So a lot of those names you've heard before. So our Mishnahs that we're going to look at is in Nizikim, or a book of damages, right? It's, I guess, fines and laws and punishments, stuff like that. And we're going to look at in a closer book called Sanhedrin. And we're going to look at the 8th chapter, and we're going to look at the first 5 Mishnahs there. All right. So here we go. We're just going to read this over today, and we're going to do one small little activity, and then we'll discuss more of it later. So, Ben Sorer Moreh, Me'ematai Naseh Ben Sorer Moreh. A Ben Sorer Moreh, when does someone become a Ben Sorer Moreh? And here's the answer. From the moment that there comes 2 hairs until a beard surrounds the genitals. All right? How come? Wait a second. We have the okay. Here we go. Good. So okay. Again, a ben Tereh Moreh. When does someone become a ben Tereh Moreh? From the moment that there comes 2 hairs until a beard surrounds his genitals. So from the moment when what the onset of what? What is that called in English? When hair starts growing on your body? And then when that hair is finished growing on your body, what has ended? Okay. As it says in the Torah, if there will be for a man a son and not a daughter, a son and not a man, A young child is patur, or exempt, because he has not come to be included as one who can be commanded. Okay, I'm just going to leave that at that right now, and we're going to discuss more about what this Mishnah means. But it's pretty interesting as far as, and I'll just ask one question right now. Tell me how, before we read this Mishnah, we knew the following. There was this label called the Ben Surah Mareh, the stubborn and rebellious child, and anyone could be included in that in that definition. But already, just in Mishnah number 1, we have slowly shrunk the definition. What is the 1, 2, 3, 4 ways in this Mishnah, 5 ways in this Mishnah, that we have shrunk the definition from big to smaller? Okay. The last thing I want to do is I want to look at this word shene'emar, because the word shene'emar, which is translated as it says in the Torah, is something that we don't often see in the Mishnah, but we do see a lot in the Talmud. Shene'emar means I'm not just going to say what I'm saying. I'm going to bring up a proof from a text. That's why it's called a proof text, a proof from a text. And what is the text that we use to prove everything Jewishly? It's the Torah. So those words shene'emar isn't just as it is said, it's as it is said in the book of books, the Torah itself. So that means that whatever comes next, we can always find that in the Torah itself. Ki yeh leish ben. And if we actually go back for a second and look where this is written in Hebrew in the Torah, see where we have it in the Hebrew. Do we have it in the Hebrew? Oh, no, maybe we don't have it in the Hebrew. But if we saw the entire piece of Ben Torah Moreh in Hebrew, which I guess I'll bring next time, we would see that it says, Ki yeh leish ben, when there is for a man a child. So, right, just read here. Whenever we see the word shene'emar, that means that what will come next is a proof text. What's a proof text anyway? A proof text is the proof for the text, the Torah. The Mishnah and the Talmud use proof text to show that they are not just making things up. The term, as it says in the Torah, is a term that will come up again and again. It's a good one to know. So our final piece of the day, a little activity, using the word shene'emar. Shene'emar, and here's what I want to do. The word shene'emar is words from the Torah. The words are used as a proof text. To prove a statement is true by justifying it with a quote from the Torah. Your job is to create 2 mini conversations in which you use the word shene'emar, in which the word shene'emar is used to introduce a word or phrase quoted from the Torah to justify your point. Here's an example. Bob says, hey, why do you talk to your parents that way? Talk to your mom that way. She deserves a little respect. Sarah says, but she talks to me that way, so I talk to her the same way. Bob, no, really, you've got to be a little nicer. Sarah says who? Bob, shene'emar, honor your mother or father. So that means the word honor your mother or father come from where? That's right. So here are a few Torah quotes that you can use as you're creating your proof text using the words shene'emar. You can write shene'emar in Hebrew or in this little transliteration shene'emar, which means just it comes from the Torah. So you're giving me 2 little mini snippet plays, and look how short I made those little mini snippet plays here. And you can do the same. See you in class, everyone.